What's happening? Riot started TV's in the building. Hope everybody's feeling really well. You know what I'm saying? We had a heavy day today. We had a remix morning show this morning, and you know, it was a real good joint, you know, like we always do around here. I realized we've been kind of neglecting you on Riot started TV as of late, and I wanted to get back in the historical swing of things. It's Black August, and as you know, Black August is a month of resistance. It's about political prisoners. You know what I'm saying? It's about our fallen comrades, namely those who came out of the California prison system, those then 11 camps 42 years ago when Black August was launched by the Black August Organizing Committee. This is a month that we remember names like W.L. Nolan, like Cleveland Edwards, Alvin Jugs Miller, Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson, Katari Golden, and many others who are still languishing in these gulags across this particular colony known as the United States. As we always talk about, if we're going to talk about reparations, we're not talking about political prisoners, we ain't talking about jack shit. So our political prisoners, they are, you know, they are comrades, they are soldiers, and you know, we can't forget our troops. So today, what I wanted to do in the tradition of what we've always done, you know, we've pushed out information on a number of different movements, going back to the UNIA, you know, and circling back around to many movements from the 60s eras, like the BLA, SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Black Panther Party, you know, and we moved on literally to the Revolutionary Action Movement, moves, so on and so forth. But what I wanted to do, the Young Lords, etc. But I wanted to circle back around because of the fact that when we talk about political prisoners, you often hear names like Marilyn Buck, you know what I'm saying, may she rise in power, you know what I'm saying, David Gilbert, and so many others, you know. But what I wanted to do was take a trip and talk to someone who experienced political prisonership being captured from another angle, you know what I mean, from the quote unquote white left. I wanted to bring in a veteran from the Weather Underground, a veteran from the Student Democratic Society, and so many other movements or whatever. So today I wanted to bring in a real good legendary warrior and comrade by the name of Laura Whitehorn. Laura Whitehorn is in the building. What's happening? How you doing?
I'm here. I'm definitely a veteran. I'm pushing 80. I actually was never in SDS, Students for Democratic Society. And I was in the Weather Underground, but I quit. And I can tell why. That's, you know, part of the story. And I was in prison, and Marilyn Buck was my dear, dear, dear comrade and friend. And yesterday was the anniversary of her death. It was 20 days after she got out of prison. Sure. So I'm so honored to be here as part of supporting Black August and fighting to free political prisoners and all of the elders, the Black people, the Native Americans, the brown people in the prisons across the country.
No doubt, no doubt. I appreciate that correction. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes my brain moves quicker than I do.
Everyone says that. Every time I'm introduced, it's you know, it's the kind of thing, it's there. You know, you can't fight.
Yeah. So we just put all white folks in SDS. Like, that's just part of the program. tell us, because I know you just mentioned that you were part of Weather Underground and you quit, and I know your history goes beyond that. But tell us about the Weather Underground from your experience and what the Weather Underground was about in regards to folks who are unaware.
Yeah, well, in a very short nutshell, or very small nutshell. So, my view and why I joined the Weather Underground was because they were talking about solidarity with international and domestic, or inside Turtle Island, movements for national liberation and fighting imperialism as a system, and understanding that, I had sort of read Marx, Workers of the World Unite, and understanding that with the growth of imperialism out of the white settler colony that is the United States, that the workers of the world were largely third world people, as was said then. Now people talk about people of color, but it was more global at that point, and it was more of a, the development of imperialism had first and third world. And so that's why I joined, because I saw that there could be a struggle for power led by Black people and Indigenous people in the United States, and that was what was going to solve the problem that I was admired in as a white person of racism in the white community, and that it was the hope for humanity, the hope for, now people talk about abolition. It was abolition of the system of imperialism and racism in those days. So that's why I joined, and they were talking about opening up a front of white youth, workers and white youth, mostly white youth. It was the revolutionary youth movement. The idea was that the Panthers, the Young Lords, which were just beginning at that point, the Young Lords in Chicago when I was there, that was the beginning point of the Young Lords, and the American Indian movement, that they were sparking the concept of rebellion against capitalism, imperialism, racism, and that we would organize, as SNCC had said, as Kwame Ture had said, white people should organize white people, racism is a white problem. And so we were organizing white people to fight in solidarity, and we weren't talking about fighting, because the other thing we understood was that there was a history which is so continued and deepened of, in the United States, of making the issue of violence sort of off the table, that any time, the state is violent, it's almost invisible how violent the state is until the cops kill someone, and then all of a sudden everyone talks about state violence. But the institutions of the state, the government itself, exists because of violence. And whether it's out there with clubs, or it's just the threat, or it's homelessness, or whatever, it's violent. And yet, when oppressed people fight back, all of a sudden you have, oh, no, don't throw rocks, don't break windows. And we were saying, we weren't promoting violence, we were saying there is a strategy in the world of national liberation struggles, fighting wars of national independence, and we should support that in action. So that was what brought me in, the Black Panthers in particular, and Fred Hampton brought me into the Weather Underground. And then over the years, that was less the Weather Underground's position, and they were moving towards an old style position of Black and white unite and fight, which in essence meant that white people would remain in leadership, because white people, even in the underground, had more resources, more connections, and also more protection from the state. So I was not the only one. That was the end of the WO, of the Weather Underground in, what year was it, 76, 77, was because there was a huge split in the organization, because some people wanted, I'm sorry for the background noise.
It's all good. Yeah, it's all good.
Some people were still promoting that Black and white unite and fight, and maintain the organization, which was, after all, a white-led organization. And other people were trying to move into solidarity, especially with the Republic of New Africa at that point, which had been frontally attacked by the government. So from a position which started with an understanding that this is a white settler colony that were the land and labor of Black people and Indigenous people, and later Latinx people, Mexican people were stolen and used, turned over to a white supremacist system. That was the beginning point. And then I feel the organization kind of moved away from that. So I joined another organization called May 19th Communist Organization. And later I went underground and ended up doing 14 years in prison for something called the Resistance Conspiracy case. Right. So, nutshell.
Nah, that was a nutshell. You made it seem so easy and so smooth with the transition, but we know it wasn't as easy and smooth as that. A couple things. First of all, for you to take a position, you and Marilyn Buck and others, to take a position that this struggle should be led by Black and other quote unquote oppressed and colonized people. How unpopular or popular was that stance, because of the fact that here you are essentially saying, I'm giving up this white privilege, because we know that even in movement and struggle, oftentimes, just as you stated, white folks feel the innate desire to lead, so how popular was that stance for you to say, okay, boom, this is some bullshit, let me get back in line and we're gonna move in this direction? How did that work for you? I mean,
it didn't work so well. With the right people. With some it did. And even today, a lot of people will say, give lip service to there has to be leadership. I mean, in the movement of formerly incarcerated people and all the organizations that have grown up around the prison system because of what's called mass incarceration, 2.5 million people, then all of a sudden it's an issue. And there are a lot of groups that say, oh, we should be led by directly affected people, formerly incarcerated people. But when you really look at the structures of the organizations, they're still led by white people. And I think that's true in the left too. I don't think you can give up white privilege. I still have it. I had it in prison.
Right.
Our case, we were charged with 8 bombings of government buildings. No public buildings, but government, the Capitol, and police institutions, the police benevolent, whatever it is, association in New York, the Israeli aircraft industries, things like that stand for white supremacy. But we were white people. And because one of our members, Alan Berkman, was threatened with death because he was so ill, we made a deal to plead guilty to the charges, and I got 20 years. If we had been a Black organization, right, we would have gotten even though no one was hurt in the bombings, but that wasn't the issue. Some of us were accused of other associated actions where people were hurt or killed. So it always lasts. You can't give it up. I think the challenge and what was exciting to me about the Weather Underground was the idea of using white privilege sort of as what do they call it, a fifth, a column, behind enemy lines.
Right,
and
right.
So we did that. I think the concept of leadership it's really hard for white people to quote, give up. I think it's more about developing honest struggle and looking at strategy. I mean, there's all this talk now among young white people and older white people about, white privilege and what do we do about it, and investigating your own privilege and all this stuff. And when they come up with their plan, I'm looking to see, are you looking to ask Black organizations, Indigenous organizations, what do you need us to do? And then sign up to do that,
Right.
So I think to me, that's the issue. And it was a very hard one, and still is, I think. And it's hard for us too. It doesn't go away, your sense of wanting to kind of control things, run things, or at least, make your voice heard and all of that. But that's why I said to you before the show started, talking about what white people should be doing, I look to third world comrades for what the strategy is. And then we try to figure out how we can be supportive and participants in that. And the last thing I'll say is because of what I do now, which is release aging people in prison, that came from a thought of, it was started by formerly incarcerated people. All of us had done some substantial time. And it was a combination of things. It was partly because we saw the political prisoners, the Black political prisoners in particular, as being not only like aging in prison and threatened with, and many have died in prison, but also being part of a larger population of older people in prison who also were being repressed, even though their acts had not been political. The reason why they were being held forever with these long sentences, the reason why there were millions of people in prison was also political, which was to make sure that there wouldn't be another uprising like happened in the 60s and 70s. Oh my God, let's never let there be another Black Panther Party that gets a response. It wasn't just about the leadership, it was the response of the community. So if we destroy the community by putting people in prison and all that, then we destroy the resistance. So that's what we saw, and that's why we started RAPP. But right now, we talk with a lot of young people who are abolitionists, and we're abolitionists too. But we say, you have to change the structures of power as you're moving towards abolition. You can't just talk about ideas. You have to really fight to change the structures of power that oppress people. And that's what I believe. So, that's why I do this work that is about challenging the ways that people are kept in prison until they age and die, as is happening now with Mutulu Shakur and Sundiata Acoli and David Gilbert, whom you mentioned, and Russell Maroon Shoatz,
Michelle McGee.
Michelle, really, come on. I mean,
close to 60 years right now.
Parole again, ridiculous.
Absolutely. And that work, and that's another reason I wanted to have you on here, because of the fact that that's another side of the gamut that folks don't look at, just the aging process. I think Sundiata is like 83 right now.
84.
84. Man, you mentioned 84 years old. I mean, like, what is he going to do? I mean, how much of a threat, but they see and they know that just his spirit, you know what I mean? So we're grateful that folks like Jalil, who's been on the show, has been released, and folks like Sekou, who's also been on the show, and so many others that survived that war. I want to backpedal, and then we want to come back and talk about RAPP, because of the fact that that's something that we're going to try to get all of our viewers to support and get involved with. But I want to go back to you mentioned the May 19th Communist Organization. I want to kind of get an idea, because of the fact that it's one of those organizations that folks don't hear about. You know what I mean? And of course, as you know, throughout the years, the main two organizations, when you talk about, white folks, you're going to hear the Weather Underground, you're going to hear SDS, but and it's almost like they get the credit that Black Lives Matter gets for a lot of the actions that's being done out here. So I kind of want to, if you could, touch on what the May 19th Communist Organization was about, and a little bit of history on that, and how you all came about with these charges or whatever, because I know that I read somewhere, and I'm not sure if it's correct, I don't know if I heard you say it, that I think Maryland and you were captured the same day, just in different areas. So I kind of want to touch on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just a capsule summary. May 19th was named after the birth date of Ho Chi Minh and Malcolm X. Also Jose Marti. I can't remember right this second.
Yuri Kochiyama as well.
Yeah, when Yuri, yeah, of course, yeah,
yes.
Right. But we named it after Malcolm and Ho, and that was partly because we were trying to say the strategy for liberation of all humanity rests with the overthrow of the imperialist system, white settler colonies like the Israeli government, control over Palestine. South Africa wasn't free at that point. We were supporting both the ANC and the PAC. And our work, we were trying to organize white people to support those struggles. We did not do that well with organizing white people. I have to say it was a real failing. But we had things like we had the Madam Bin Graphics Collective, which I was really honored to be part of since I'm really not an artist, which produced posters, some of which are still like in the Schomburg now because they were done directly under the leadership and with some of the people from the organizations you've mentioned. One, when you were talking about the leaders from California and Black August, I was thinking of people in New York State like Akil al-Jundi, we worked with to produce a poster commemorating the Attica Rebellion and showing how the Attica Rebellion had sparked rebellions across the country. We did things like that. We had a women's committee against genocide. You know, we were fighting at that point against a tendency which is now called carceral feminism, which in those days was white women who were angry, rightfully, because rape was not being taken seriously and they had no protection, but they went to the police. They had something called Take Back the Night in New York, and they wanted to pal up with, or, you know, ally with the police to arrest rapists. And we said, no, don't, you know, we have to learn to defend ourselves, but certainly you do not ally with the police who are going to go out and arrest the first Black man they see.
Sure.
So we had efforts like that. And the one that I was most involved with and that I'm kind of proudest of is the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee. Because, you know, we quoted Malcolm X saying, if white people want to know what they can do, tell them to be like John Brown. Right. And so, and we found out from incarcerated people in Napanoch, Eastern Correctional Facility in Napanoch, New York, that the Grand Dragon of the New York State Klan, and there was a New York State Ku Klux Klan, was teaching reading in the prison. And
Napanoch.
Yeah, in Napanoch, and a lot of the guards were members of the Klan, and and I think it was Halloween that year, they ran through the prison with nooses and wearing hoods. I mean, it was just, and at that point, all guards in the New York State system were white. Now, you know, they've managed to like make it look a little better by hiring some Black guards. But so we started the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee, and we were trying to organize white people against white supremacy in that same way. So those were some of the things that we did. It was, the organization ended right around the time of the Brinks expropriation and the arrests that came from that, which was an attempt to take money from an armored car in Nyack, New York, for revolutionary purposes. And it was just following the liberation of Assata Shakur, and May 19th members were implicated in those things, along with people who were identified as having been in the Weather Underground, like David Gilbert and Kathy Badine. So that was the actual, you know, sort of tapering off after that of the organization, because it was under so much attack by the state. But at that point, some of us went underground.
So I know
that answers, right? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you got it. You nailed it. And you helped me to push it along, because when you talked about the whole Brinks expropriation in '81, that was the case with Matulu. I think Maryland was being accused of being a member of the BLA at the time. You know, and all types of other nonsense, Bilal Sunni Ali and folks like that. I wanted to, with that situation, so that's '81. I know that a number of folks went underground, and you all were captured in '85. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
May of '85.
Okay. So, yeah. So, I mean it was good that you all were able to elude all that time, or whatever, for lack of better words, you know. But I wanted to know, like, for folks, one thing we mentioned that yesterday was the anniversary of the death of Marilyn Buck, who is a courageous freedom fighter who we feel don't get enough credit. I think she's been gone for what, 5-6 years now, or?
Yeah, I'm bad on dates. I remember it, you know, so vividly, but I couldn't place the year. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's a brain glitch I had.
Right. So these bastards were kind enough to release her 20 days before she transitioned. For folks who are unaware with Marilyn, who Marilyn is, do you mind giving us a brief bio of Marilyn Buck?
She was a member of SDS. She was not a member of the Weather Underground. And by the way, her release was through the brilliant and unrelenting pressure by her attorney, Sophia Elijah, who was an activist in New York State, wonderful person.
Yes.
And Marilyn went to first she went to University of Texas in Austin, I guess. Then she went to Berkeley. And in Berkeley, she met up with Third World Newsreel, and she began to be a photographer, and she was doing work in support of the Black Panthers. And she got arrested in, I think it was, what year was it, 72, 73, for purchasing a box of bullets. And she was given the longest sentence anyone had ever been given for illegally purchasing a box of bullets. She got, oh God, I can't remember now, but I think 10 years for that, which was ridiculous.
Wow.
And she was given a furlough at a certain point and didn't return to Alderson, West Virginia, and went underground again. And, just want to say something, Sekou too. Sekou Odinga was free in the world, right? And in order to support the struggle within the Turtle Island, within the borders of the United States, he returned and rejoined the underground. So, so both of them, there's a parallel there. Both of them said, hell no. We used to say in Vietnam War days, when people were being drafted, guys used to say, hell no, we won't go. And Sekou and Marilyn sort of said, hell no, we will go. We'll go back and try to continue this struggle. Wow. And she was, she was an amazing, she was just a great friend too, and a brilliant poet. And some of her writings have been published, and I think some comrades are working on a book of her writings. And I think what began, there were so many things she had written that it's a little hard to, get it down to less than 1,000 pages. So
no doubt.
Brilliant woman. And she, she believed that if you don't have a vision of a world with a better kind of system and more humanity than exists now, then you're just living day to day. And so she dedicated her life to creating a piece of that vision. And, I think she did that.
All right. Definitely. Marilyn Buck is definitely a cultural icon, for lack of better words. You know what I mean? So definitely a salute to her. We know that you, political prisoner, you know what I mean? You were sentenced to what, 20?
Yeah, I was sentenced to 23 or something like that, and I got away with 14. I got out of 14 through just manipulation of the Federal Bureau of Prisons computation system.
Okay.
And when and then I did 5 years on supervised release, even though I hadn't gone to the parole board. But when I got off supervised release, my partner, Susie Day, fantastic woman who I met when she interviewed me and Marilyn and Susan Rosenberg and Linda Evans in prison, and we fell in love, and it stuck. Anyway, she and I were saying that when the day that I got out, and was the beginning of the period in which the Puerto Rican prisoners got out, Linda and Marilyn got out, all of these political prisoners got out, but who was left was, at that point, Sundiata still.
That's right.
Sekou, Abdul Majid and Bashir Hamid, who died inside. So it was,
It's like 3 of them are ancestors now from that. Yeah. Wow. Man, so you were released like what, 2004, something like that?
Well, I was released in the end of 99.
Oh, the end of 99.
85 and went out. And one of the wonderful things that I took out of prison, besides my relationship with Susie Day, was a lifelong friendship with Marshal Eddie Conway from Maryland. And I learned something really, really key in that moment, which was, so I was in Baltimore City Jail, which was, they're tearing it down right now, the old City Jail. I mean, there were bars, but no glass in the windows. There was no heat. It was really a hellhole. And
there was bars. You're saying to the outside, there were bars with no windows. So it's just
no glass. The glass had been broken. So it was freezing, and we had garbage. I mean, it was the most pathetic thing. Right when I got arrested, my case was in the newspaper, and I started getting kites from guys in the men's jail across the street on the men's prison, and they said, "Oh, you must know Eddie Conway," and I said, "Well, I've heard of him, but I don't know him." But through other people, we developed a correspondence around the situation. But what I learned from that was that he was so well loved, and he had organized so many younger incarcerated men that he was in prison with, that, if you didn't know anything else about political prisoners, and you didn't define them by getting extreme sentences or, being denied parole, all of which is true, but which is true of other people as well in prison who aren't political. But what's really important is that from the day that political prisoners go in, they are being mentors. And in the men's prisons, the intervention to end relations of violence happens in women's prisons too, but it's a little different in the way that men's prisons are controlled through actual violence and women's through the threat of violence and the threat of sexual violence. But the impact that he has made on thousands of people in Maryland is, you couldn't do that with a $20 billion program from the Gates or something like that, and that to me is why we say in the movement a lot, oh, people haven't heard about political prisoners. Walk into any meeting of formerly incarcerated people in New York State, they know who political prisoners are because of
and that's a excellent point. And I'm just thinking back, just organizing back in the 80s, right? There was 80s, 90s. There was a period when it was looking like nobody was coming home. You know what I mean? It was few and far between. And then all of a sudden, folks like yourself and so many others during the early 2000s, Robert King Wilkerson and some of these other, like you said later on, the Eddie Conways, and now folks from Move 9, most of them, and you mentioned Marshall Eddie Conway and Jalil and Sekou,
and Herman.
And Herman Bell. These are folks that, back in the day, they were just on a poster to us. You know what I'm saying? I remember having these posters in our rooms and whatnot. And I know that Kazi, shout out to Kazi Torre. I know he had redid these posters at one point, but it was like baseball cards. You know what I'm saying? It was like, and unfortunately, more prisoners at one point were transitioning than actually being released. You know what I mean? So I still have some of the old posters from like the 1990s and whatnot. And just looking at it now, it's just like, it's amazing because of the fact for folks like us, we were out here hoping, not knowing if you all would ever come out, but just having that belief that the captives would be set free. For folks that's checking us out right now, in your words, how important is it to support political prisoners? How important is it to get behind this campaign or these campaigns?
I think you can't fight for justice without supporting political prisoners, because political prisoners are kind of at the what I want to call it, the point of pressure between state violence and revolutionary and resistance and movements for social justice, whatever they are, because there are political prisoners, also water defenders now are in prison We have a friend who's a plowshare prisoner. They're doing short time, the plowshare prisoners, but they are in prison. They went to prison during COVID. There's a COVID, what do? You don't put people in congregate settings. The government chose to send Claire Grady and other plowshares from the Catholic left activists who, what did they do? They expose nuclear bases. They destroy or damage nuclear warheads. And then it's different from us. We would do stuff and try to get away. They would do stuff and stand there to get arrested, because part of their point was to alert people to the danger of war and imperialism. They're very anti-imperialist, and also to create a moral thread to the movement, to say, we benefit in this country, we benefit from all the riches of living in this war economy all the time, and we have to reject that, we have to overturn it. So all those political prisoners around the country. And the other thing, I think, and this is why we created RAPP, is that if you don't see the point of the government putting political prisoners in prison and keeping them there, then you don't understand the point of the prison system. Because to me, the point of the prison system is to destroy, to maintain white supremacy, not just through the actual destruction of communities of color, but also to terrorize those communities, to destroy their economic base, to destroy their family structure in order to prevent resistance. And so, to me, that's why you have a government has prisons, to repress dissent. And it's sometimes hard to see that when you've got millions of people in prison and there are only fewer than maybe 50 or 100 political prisoners. But that, to me, is the connection. And I saw that in my own time, with both what the women that I was in prison with understood, when they understood who I and Linda Evans and Marilyn Buck and Alejandrina Torres and all of the women who we were, and especially the Puerto Rican independence movement women, but also what I understood from seeing what happened to them and their families. These are women of childbearing years, right, between 20 and 45. So either they can't have kids now because they're in prison, or the kids that they did have are being taken away or are in unstable family situations sometimes, or whatever, but it is genocide. So a long-winded way to say, if you don't understand, I think, if you don't understand and support political prisoners, then you're not fighting the use of prisons in this country as a tool of state repression and violence.
It's wild that you said genocide, because that's the exact word that popped into my head when you said about not being able to have children based on, those very necessary and important years, particularly with women. I want to talk about RAPP a little bit. I know that right now, I believe it's like over 10,000 elderly prisoners just in the state of New York. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's gone down some through our work, actually.
Okay.
It's something like 8,500, something like that. Just before we get into RAPP, I just want to put in one little pitch for the Spirit of Mandela Tribunal happening in October, which we'll talk about. We charge genocide in prison. So
let's talk about that now.
Jaleel on, you know about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. I mean, let's talk about that. We can get into RAPP. We'll wrap with RAPP.
Yeah. Well, I can't really represent the tribunal because I haven't been actively working on it, although I'm
okay.
But I think that it's really important to know that for years, Black leaders have tried to bring charges of genocide against the United States in the UN.
And Paul Robeson, right?
Goes all the way back, and that it's been true for years. It's been obvious for years. And that the United States, in addition to walking out of the International Conference Against Racism and not, allowing the UN to take actions against the obvious war crimes carried out by Israel against the Palestinian people, also has no interest in righting its own errors in terms of human rights. So the tribunal is both an attempt to re-raise that issue and also to alert people that we can't look to the party structure and the government as it exists now for the answer to how people should organize. So I think there will be really interesting ideas about how we can organize ourselves into a more powerful, unified movement coming out of the tribunal. It's October 22nd to 24th, I think, in New York's. I'm sure you have the link and could put it on the screen, but we're inviting people from all over the country to come, and people are figuring out housing now. And there's a video that has been created, a very short video with the first of the charges about what's called hyper-incarceration of Black people. But it's a very exciting, and Jalil's been thinking about it for years, and others, Jihad Mehmet, who's another leader of the effort. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, we actually just had Jihad on our morning show about 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
and we have another podcast called Renegade Culture that Kamal Franklin and I co-host. And we actually had Jalil actually did his first ever podcast with us. So so we definitely looking forward to get both back on to talk about what was going on. We got to rep for the political prisoners. We here,
The place.
We trying to,
So I will talk about RAPP. So as I said, RAPP was created, it was about 2012 or 13, I guess. A wonderful man who's also died way too soon after getting out, named Mujahid Fareed, who did time with Kwesi Balagoon and David Gilbert and Herman and Jalil and a lot of people in the New York State system. And Kathy Boudin and I were all concerned about the fact that the people who we were in prison with, who had long sentences, were all going to die in there because there were no avenues for release. In New York State, people were parole eligible. I mean, Jalil went 13 times. Herman went either 10 or 11 before they got out, because every time they were told, we can't let you out because of the nature of your crime. And so everything you've done in the years since then, all the people that you have taught, everything you've achieved means nothing. So we started to pressure the mechanisms of release that exist, which are parole, compassionate release, and clemency from the governor. But we were most interested in parole because that is an actual structure that could be affected. So we worked on the regulations that govern release on parole, which were in the beginning totally about you can't get out, period, and the nature of the crime. And we sort of got them through two big organizing efforts of hundreds of people writing comments to the state registry that governs the regulations. We got them moved a little bit so that now something called risk and needs assessments have to be taken into account and are actually a guiding principle. And that means that when Herman and Jalil and Robert Seth Hayes, another whom we should name Presente, when they went to the board for the first time, they had commissioners who looked at all of the letters they got, all the support, all of the amazing things they had been doing while they were in prison, and balanced those against the nature of the crime, which was, from 1971. And now it's, 2000, and what year did Herman get out? 2014, I guess. So, 2015. So we were able to make some changes, and we changed the commissioners. We were able to force the governor to nominate some better commissioners. We were able to work with the Senate committee in New York State that approves commissioners, so that they didn't approve some of the really bad ones and did approve some good ones. So we made some changes, but now we want to change the actual structures. And so we have two bills that we've been agitating for. One is called Fair and Timely Parole, which would flip the standards of parole so that the main thing to be considered would be who the person is now, and not they were when they were 19 years old or 18 years old, 40 years ago. And the other one is elder parole, which is my favorite, actually, because it would end life without parole and virtual life sentences. Because once you hit 55 and you've done 15 years, you get a shot at parole, even though thousands of people in New York State have, like David Gilbert, 75 years to life or without parole. But we also, we're mostly a grassroots organization made up of formerly incarcerated people and family members of currently incarcerated people. And so we push on all fronts, the legislature, because the Democrats run the legislature now. So let's take advantage through public pressure on the parole board to do what they're supposed to do. Through every means we have, we are fighting to end, life imprisonment, and ultimately to abolish the prison system and create alternatives and things that have come out of communities, where communities make their own decisions about how to deal with violence and theft and the other things that people end up going to prison for. And the last thing I'll say about it is, when we started it, so 2012, 13, there was this burgeoning movement of all these groups that are trying to change the prison system because it's horrible, right? Raise the age of criminal liability, do away with money bail, a lot of really good, important things. But everyone was talking about low-level, non-violent cases because that's easier. You can say to someone, "Oh, don't worry, he didn't hurt anyone.
He's safe." Right.
And we were saying, "Okay, who's that going to leave behind?" If we make big reforms, in New York State, they did. They reformed the Rockefeller drug laws to some extent. So the overall prison population had fallen by 27% when we started RAPP. But the population of people 50 and older had doubled. So we're looking at a system where the political prisoners would never get out, and neither would all the other people convicted, especially of having attacked or killed a cop. So that's sort of what RAPP was. And it's been one of the most exciting things I've ever done, because it's really led by people who have family members inside, people who themselves did these long sentences and awoke to politics from their own situation. And it's extremely exciting. I love it. So
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
That seems like a serious transition from where you came from to, is this something that you could look down the barrel of time and see, or how would you have felt about this back then?
I don't know how I would have felt, but when I got out, so I got out in '99, and we started with, I was part of a group that we were so naive. We thought we could do a petition to President Clinton to let all the political prisoners out, not realizing at first that he didn't even have jurisdiction over most of the political prisoners. Most are in the state. He had jurisdiction over the Puerto Ricans and anyone in the federal system, but not. So then I joined with some leaders from the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and we tried to do a campaign just around the New York State political prisoners and showing how they should get parole. And it really didn't go anywhere because it was butting up against, all of the blowback from the cops and the Republicans and the conservatives. And then we tried to do a clemency campaign when one governor, Governor Patterson, was resigning. He had to resign because of a scandal. All New York governors, now we have no one. They're like, I run it. So then, and then, they mess it up. We worked, and we had huge support from all over the country, from people. And Ben Cheney, who was the baby brother of James Cheney, who was killed in Mississippi in '64.
Cheney, right.
He was one of the leaders of our campaign, and we had Archbishop Tutu was writing letters to. we couldn't have had more support. And Patterson chickened out because he was afraid of the cops. And so at that point, I thought, okay, we're just going right up against the exact thing, the brick wall. And the police in New York State have an organization that is the largest union, quote, union, it's not really a union, in the world. They have
largest gang in the world.
Right? And they run, I mean, they've run the media for years. They run, you know, shows like Law and Order and all that. Their message gets across. It gets into people's brains day and night, and they have power. So we thought, okay, we're not going to be able to go headbutt against them over and over again. How do we go around? How do we go, you know? And Eddie Ellis, late also, who was also a Black Panther, who did time in prison and is highly respected in New York State. And he said to me, you know, you're not going to ever get it by saying free the political prisoners in New York State. No governor, no parole board is going to do that. They're not going to say, oh yeah, I support the right of self-determination for Black people up to and including armed struggle. They're just not going to say it. Right. So he said, why don't you look at the question of elders? Because there are other people who are in the same situation, even though they don't have political cases. And you just don't know about them because you're just looking at the political prisoners. And sure enough, there they were. So, and at that point, there was a crisis around the country of the rising number of elders in prisons, and all these administrations and, you know, sociologists are talking about starting geriatric units in prisons. Right. And we said, that's ridiculous, release them. They have no risk of recidivism. Anyway, so that's where it came from. But I think if I had, like, although, you know, when I was underground, I used to joke with Jaleel about this. You know, if we were on our way to do something and we were stopped for a taillight or something by a cop, we didn't say, off the pig, national liberty. We said, excuse me, officer, did I do something wrong? So that you could get past there and go do what you're trying to do. Right. Use what you got to. And Matulu, who always said, you know, the I don't want to say the escape, the getaway is more important, that the plan to get away is more important than the plan for whatever. That's right. So I try to apply those things, you know, and we've run into now a little bit of a stumbling block because the cops and the Republicans figured out what we were doing. In the press, they say, look what they did. They were able to get this commissioner on the board. They did this thing. But, and we believe in mass struggle. So, you know, we had 500 people in the Capitol right before COVID, 600 people talking about freeing elders, you know, so. Yeah,
and they've been going hard. And I think I always tell folks, you know, because they talk about the police are the quote unquote hitmen, and the unions are the mafia. You know what I'm saying? They're the ones, as soon as, you know, a pig pops someone, as soon as the cop shoots somebody, they're the first ones on the joint coming up with excuses. Well, you know, the 11-year-old, you know, his hand was shaped like a gun, and, you know, he got into a fight in first grade and all this other bullshit. They're the first to jump up on the scene. I remember when last year, in fact, when they were trying to get, we were trying to get Jaleel out. You know, you had the new attorney general, Black woman, who's probably younger than me, Letitia, whatever her name is.
James.
She's the main one jumping up like, no, I don't think he should be released. He's a danger to society, so on and so forth. Here it is. You have a devout Muslim who's in his 60s. Was Jaleel like 67, 68 years old?
He's about to turn 70 in October.
Yeah. So, I mean, they literally were trying to kill him with COVID, you know, with the lack of medical treatment. And then all of a sudden, you know, he's a threat to society because he might get out and do something. Yeah. You know, it's really a ridiculous state. I want to know, we have about 5 minutes for folks who are around the world and around the country. You know what I mean? How can what can they do to support RAPP? You know, how can we support RAPP, and how can we put some extra legwork behind this campaign?
Well, the main thing they can do is join the struggle to free all political prisoners and to end policing and incarceration. But that's pretty general. I feel funny asking for this, but we basically look to communities for our support, so they can go on our website and there's a little donate page and they can sign up to be a monthly sustainer for like $5, $10. You know, if they can give more, that's great. But that would really help, because formally, when people get out of prison, they need money. And in order, you know, the movement against mass incarceration is largely the talking heads a lot of times are academics, wonderful people who support the struggle and all of that, but that's who is looked to for the experts. But the real experts are the people who did that time and understand the system from the inside out. But they need money in order to be able to spend time. You know, I was white and middle class when I went to prison and college educated, and I was when I got out. So I could get a job editing at an HIV magazine and do this work, you know, on the side. But for most people, those jobs aren't waiting for them. So if people can become a monthly sustainer of RAPP, they could also go to Spirit of Mandela and donate and sign on to as an endorser of that platform. And then they can go to rappcampaign.com and look on the press page and look on the events page, where I'm about to leave for a vigil and rally to commemorating the 5th anniversary of the death behind bars of a man named John McKenzie, who was denied parole 10 times. He had also killed a police officer in Long Island. He was this amazing guy who was, you know, had become a Buddhist, and people loved him inside. And he died by suicide after his 10th parole denial because he saw no future and he was in such misery. And we're going to commemorate him with a vigil and rally challenging the state to release people. So
is that today or this vigil?
Today, 6 o'clock in where is it? Union Square.
So folks in New York, Union Square today, John McKenzie, 6 p.m.
Yeah, 6. I think it'll probably just be an hour.
Yeah, beat Laura to the spot. See if you can get there before she do.
And they can write to us. Our address is on the website, and we will, you know, we do. I spend a lot of time talking with people in other states, sort of going through how we started, because one of the things I think a lot of times that activists around prisons, especially if you haven't been inside, it's really different for people who have, because if you've been inside, like I was in the feds, right? I know that system is different from the state.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if I'm in New York or I'm in Maryland, they're two different systems. Every system is different. So if you want to affect actual change and get elders out, which by the way is how we'll build the movement for a revolutionary movement to end the prison system in this country, you have to know what are the soft points in your state structure. What can you hit? What can't you? Because a lot of people want to start with legislation. We didn't write legislation until the Democrats had control of both chambers in the state government and the governorship, you know, and now maybe we'll get an actual Democratic governor for what that would be worth, because Cuomo. Anyway, so those are some of the things.
Well, you know, may Cuomo go to hell with his father, who was one of the reasons why there's so many prisons in New York State right now, Mario Cuomo. So if I can nicely say, fuck Mario, Andrew, and Chris. How about that? So anyway, you heard it here first. Riot started TV. Don't get it twisted. We accept no compromise. Laura, rappcampaign.com, RAPP campaign.com. Make sure you check out rappcampaign.com. We will be reaching to Jalil and Jihad to talk more about the Spirit of Mandela. Laura, I appreciate you coming through. You know what I mean?
Appreciate you having me on. It's really an honor. It's great to talk to you.
You've been one of my heroes and sheroes. You know what I mean? I appreciate, you know, putting in that work, especially the charges you got. When I first heard about you, I was like, well, that's my favorite white woman.
Well, you know, that's another example. It's like when I first was arrested, I would have done 78 years Yes. But so, and luckily I had some lawyers who also acted like they had been underground and thought, well, what's the soft point? What can we attack and get these charges? It's worked better than I did go into court and raise my fist and, get beaten by them, all that. But strategy, we know people who are fighting the system know the system. And yes. I think we can tear it apart. We used to say, destruyendo el monstruo desde las entrañas. My Spanish accent is terrible.
Mine is a little worse than yours, but go ahead.
Right, let's do it.
But it's all good. We appreciate you, Laura. Anytime you all have anything coming up, make sure you hit me up, and we'll definitely have you on the platform. And stay safe out there, and we're gonna win in spite of all of this bullshit.
Thank you so much. Such a
no doubt. Thank you. Stay strong. We'll talk to you in a minute.
Yeah.
Boom. You're checking out Riot Starter TV. That was Laura Whitehorn. If you're just checking in, rewind. You know what I mean? And check out Riot Starter TV. And we have a whole lot more coming next week. We have another special guest. I'm not going to name any names. I think it's time for another woman to come on. You know what I mean? Because of the fact that oftentimes when we talk about freedom fighters, we forget about sisters in the movement. So definitely, we have someone special coming on next week as well. I appreciate you all. I know that this is a last minute thing. We just announced a few hours ago that this will be happening. And, we got a pretty good turnout. So let your folks know. Do us a favor. And as our good sister Marian Anderson said, hit that like button before you exit. But also, even more importantly than that, go ahead and share this with your network so folks can know what's going on out here. Anyway, till next time, check us out tomorrow morning, the Remix Morning Show, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. tomorrow morning EST. All right, we out of here. Riot Starter TV, you know what to do. Peace. Ready for